Welcome to our Cybertalks interview series. I'm Wyatt Cash on behalf of CyberScoop, and I'm here today with Christopher Harrell, Chief Technology Officer at Yubico. Christopher, thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure.
Our first question, there's been a lot thrown at CISOs in 2020. How would you describe what's changed for CISOs and the role of CISOs in 2020?
Well, I think most importantly, they're humans, so they're dealing with a lot of the same stuff that everyone else is at home. And that's family and societal stress. They have to type in passwords where others might see. Having sensitive conversations is more difficult, and that's something CISOs do a lot of. But I think the job, as opposed to the person, has changed in a few ways as well. We've got a lot of new challenges for a lot of businesses. So I think organizational risk tolerance calculus might change quite a bit along with those new business challenges. And staying in touch with your business counterparts to understand how the mission has changed, how any business or financial considerations have changed is tough, but it's more important than ever. I think more frequent touch points can help with that with other leaders so that you can empathize with their new mandates and their specific challenges. And those specific challenges are things like almost no physical component can now be assumed. You've got whole call centers that are suddenly having to work from home, where you used to have network gear that could monitor what connections were being made and those sorts of things. That's no longer the case. Authentication is very different. You're no longer in a controlled room on a known computer. You're on whatever computer could be scrounged up at somebody's house. So that's a lot of stuff.
Well, certainly one of the things they're having to deal with is the fact that workforces are now so much more distributed than they were 2 months ago. What concepts do you believe are helping them with that shift between zero trust, two-factor authentication, micro-segmentation, and the like?
Well, I mean, one of the challenges that's hitting everyone at the moment is almost everything that people are being asked to do is new. And so, people's normal sense of, is this weird or not? Everything is weird, right? Working from home is weird. These new technologies that they're using is weird. So we don't get the same signal that we get from our user populace. So technology is much more important. I do think that microsegmentation is a good idea to prevent lateral movement generally. And that's mostly about defining security boundaries and enforcing and monitoring them, mostly between server endpoints. And the good news is that the productivity endpoints are not all in one place anymore. So they're already being segmented a little bit. But that brings up some other challenges. The idea that things are behind the firewall is no longer sufficient, right? So a lot of companies are being pushed into the modern age more quickly than they might have anticipated. That means a lot of stuff, though, when you're looking at zero trust or beyond corp mentality. It's identity and access management. It's single sign-on, strong authentication. You need step-up authentication. VPN policies may not be what they used to be. Getting used to the idea that your network devices are just not in one place anymore is really tough for people. And it's not a simple matter of deploying a product, it's a whole mentality shift. And then likewise, you mentioned two-factor authentication, but as we've seen in the news lately, I think it's necessary but insufficient. You really need multi-factor authentication that is phishing resistant, because it's far too easy to trick people, particularly when they don't have that sense of normalcy anymore. So it's not unexpected for them to get a call or a email or a SMS or something like that from somebody that seems legitimate, asking them to do something that seems reasonable, but without technology there that can help them stay protected, that's really challenging.
Well, next, I'd like to ask about emerging technologies and supply chain concerns. IoT and 5G technologies continue to come online across the US and the world, and that obviously means more technology being brought in-house to handle those improvements. So when it comes to supply chains, how should we as industry and customers collectively handle those concerns while still trying to make sure that we don't fall behind technologically?
Yeah, that one's really, really tough. We talked a little bit earlier about microsegmentation, and I think in an office environment where you're ending up with more of the building systems online, microsegmentation helps a lot, at least in terms of isolating the problems that can arise. When we see big companies that we know at least have been around for a while or are likely to be around for a little while longer, like Apple or Microsoft or Google on the operating system side of things, and Intel, AMD, ARM on the other side of things, there's a set of expectations that they're going to continue to support things, they're going to respond well when there are problems found. In IoT land, it's very different. The set of operating systems is all over the map. Sometimes there aren't operating systems, and those ones that do exist are not able to have the same level of protections that we have in our desktop operating systems. Even the chips that people are deploying, the financial pressures on deploying IoT devices means that they choose things that can do the job, but at the minimum possible cost. I mean, there is some standardization there, but the incentives you have around a light bulb are very different from the incentives you have around a desktop operating system or a laptop where you have a sort of 3-year horizon or even longer on the operating system. So I think when evaluating technology that lives in critical environments, you have to look at the companies that provide them, what assurances they have, whether or not they're getting third-party review, and then what your expectations are for, what level of access those things have and who needs to access them. You combine them with these other authentication technologies and segmentation, and you can at least contain the threat a little bit, because there's certainly no stopping it.
Well, lastly, as cyber threats continue to grow in sophistication, organizations continue to face persistent challenges in recruiting skilled cybersecurity professionals, capable of protecting their systems against malicious actors. How do we close the gaps that exist in the nation's and the world's current cybersecurity sphere, and in particular when it comes to education and training?
Well, I think there's a couple angles on that. There's educating and training the people who already work for you, who are doing your primary business. And there's also educating the new set of cybersecurity professionals who are coming out. I'm not sure which one of those you mean, but I'll try and cover both of them. I think we've seen certain universities adapt pretty well. I won't name specifics, but I think the cybersecurity programs at a few, at least in the US universities, have really changed and kept up with the times. And we've seen candidates come out of those curriculum with real world applicable skills right away. I think the internships are more meaningful. So when you're doing internships in companies, they're getting involved directly in security stuff from the very beginning, and those internships are deep. So those things make a big difference. And the other thing I've seen change quite a bit on the institutional side rather than the educational institution side, the business side of things, is that security teams are starting to share with one another more. I think we're all familiar with the defender's dilemma. And one of the things that can help with that is to have businesses that are, and governments and other entities that are sharing information with one another about the threats they're seeing and the techniques they're using that are working and that aren't working. And together those things, they add up. They make it so that as we're collaborating, the attackers are having a harder and harder time with things.
Well, Christopher, Harrell, thank you so much for stopping by and sharing your insights with us. We really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.